I thought moving into a quiet neighborhood would be the start of peace. But instead, it felt like stepping straight into a war zone. A stranger, standing at my door, shouting rules I had never agreed to. Notes left on my porch, whispers spreading behind my back. And then, one night, in front of the entire neighborhood, Karen made her biggest mistake. She didn't know who she was talking to. And when my wife finally revealed the truth, the whole street went silent. But that silence was only the beginning. Welcome, friends, to HOA Max Stories. My name is Robert. I'm a husband, a father, and for years I've been living in a neighborhood where the HOA seems more like a kingdom than a community. And today, I'm going to share with you one of the most shocking nights of my life. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something. If you're over 50, you know the value of real stories you can feel in your bones. So, if you enjoy these tales as much as I enjoy telling them, take a moment and hit that subscribe button, it means more than you know. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know where our neighbors are tuning in from. Now, let's step into the story. The night it all began still feels like yesterday. I remember stepping out onto my porch, coffee in my hand, the smell of pine trees in the air, and for a moment I thought I was living the dream. A quiet street, the lake not too far away, neighbors waving in the distance, the kind of place you'd think was built for peace. But then I saw her. A woman standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like she'd been waiting for this very moment. I didn't even know her name then, but I would soon hear it whispered all across the block. Karen. HOA Karen. She walked up slowly, her heels clicking against the pavement, her chin lifted high like she was marching into battle. And before I could even say hello, she pointed her finger right at me. "You have made a mistake," she said. "A big one." At first, I laughed it off. I thought maybe she had the wrong house. Maybe she was joking. But her face, it was stone cold. "You refused to join the HOA," she continued, her voice sharp like glass. "And in this neighborhood, that is not acceptable." I sipped my coffee, trying to keep calm. I had heard about HOAs before. Some were fine, some were strict, but this? This felt different. She wasn't asking. She was declaring war. I told her politely that my wife and I had no interest in joining. We didn't see the need to pay fees for rules we never asked for. Our yard was clean, our house was painted, and we weren't bothering anyone. But Karen didn't care. She leaned closer, almost whispering now, as if she wanted the words to cut straight into me. "If you don't join, you'll regret it. I'll make sure of that." And then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there with my coffee gone cold. That was the first time I realized we weren't just living in a neighborhood. We were living in Karen's kingdom. The next few days proved me right. A note taped to my front door, written in bold letters, "HOA rules apply whether you sign or not." Another one slipped into my mailbox, "Last warning before consequences." And the strangest part? Nobody else seemed surprised. The neighbors barely made eye contact. Some waved half-heartedly, some turned away altogether. It was like everyone already knew what happened when you said no to Karen. One afternoon, my wife came home from work carrying groceries. She was tired, still in her uniform, and just wanted to get inside. That's when Karen showed up again. This time, she didn't keep her voice low. She shouted so the whole street could hear. "You either sign those HOA papers, or I'll call the cops on you tonight." My wife froze, the bags heavy in her hands. Tomatoes rolled out onto the driveway. I rushed to pick them up, but my eyes stayed locked on Karen. The neighbors peeked from their curtains. I could see shadows moving in the windows. Everyone was watching. My wife said nothing. She just stared at Karen, calm but firm, like she was measuring every word in her head. And Karen, she smirked. She thought she had one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching her house across the street, the porch light glowing like a watchtower. She was waiting for us to break. She wanted us to cave. But what she didn't know was that my wife wasn't like everyone else. She wasn't afraid of threats. The following evening, Karen returned. Not alone this time. Two men came with her, tall and silent, both wearing matching HOA badges clipped to their belts. They stood behind her like guards. Karen pointed at our front door, shouting again. "This is your last chance. Either sign the HOA contract, or tomorrow morning the police will be here." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It was like something out of a movie, neighbors gathering quietly on their porches, watching this showdown unfold. My wife stepped forward. Calm. Slow. Almost too calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't even look nervous. Instead, she reached into her bag. Karen tilted her head, a smug smile still on her face. "Go ahead," she sneered. "Show me your excuses." But what my wife pulled out wasn't an excuse. It was a badge. A real federal badge. The kind that shines under the porch light and makes the air go still. Karen's smile vanished. Her voice cracked as she stammered, "What is that supposed to mean?" My wife looked her straight in the eye. "It means," she said softly, "that if you keep threatening me, you won't be dealing with your little HOA anymore. You'll be dealing with the federal government." The two men with Karen took a step back instantly. Their eyes widened, and for the first time, they looked unsure. Karen's finger trembled as she tried to point, but no words came out. The silence was louder than her shouting had ever been. And then, she turned. She stormed off down the driveway, the two men scrambling after her. The neighbors, who had been hiding behind curtains, suddenly pulled back. Some even closed their doors quickly, like they didn't want to be caught staring. The street was quiet again. But not the kind of quiet that feels safe. The kind of quiet that feels like the calm before another storm. Because the next morning, when I opened my mailbox, I found a new letter. This one wasn't handwritten. It had an official seal, stamped deep into the paper. The HOA's seal. Bigger, colder, more threatening. That's when I realized. Karen may have been silenced for now, but the HOA itself had only just begun its fight. Now, I need to ask you something, neighbors. If you were in my place, standing beside my wife as she flashed that badge, would you feel safe knowing Karen was gone, or would you fear what the real HOA might do next? Tell me in the comments, because I truly wonder what you would have done. When I held that letter in my hand, something felt different. The paper was heavier, the seal pressed deep into it, the kind of letter that doesn't come from one person, but from an entire system. It wasn't Karen's handwriting anymore. This was official. I opened it slowly, and the words made my stomach sink. Notice of violation. Failure to comply with HOA membership requirements will result in fines, property liens, and further enforcement actions. Property liens. Those two words echoed in my head. It wasn't just about signing papers anymore. It was about our home, the very roof over our heads. I showed it to my wife. She didn't even flinch. She read it calmly, folded it back up, and said quietly, "They're trying to scare us. That's all this is." But I wasn't so sure. That evening, I walked outside. Karen's house was dark, but I saw shadows moving behind her curtains. And I realized, she wasn't acting alone anymore. She had the full HOA behind her. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one with pictures. Pictures of our front yard. Our mailbox. Even the side of our house. Someone had been walking around our property, taking photos, without us even knowing. And beneath each picture, a note. Violation. 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 For what? For grass too long? For a mailbox that didn't match the neighborhood? For not joining their little club? I felt anger boiling inside me. But my wife stayed calm. She looked at me and said, "Let them come. Let them try." That night, we heard footsteps. right outside our fence. I opened the blinds just enough to see, and there they were. Two men, clipboards in hand, shining flashlights at our house like they were inspecting every inch of it. I almost opened the door. I almost shouted. But my wife touched my arm and whispered, "Not yet." The next morning, another letter. This time, no warnings. No threats. Just one line, bold and cold. "We will take legal action." The neighbors pretended not to notice, but I saw the way they looked at us. Some with pity. Some with fear. Some with satisfaction, as if Karen had turned them against us too. Still, my wife stayed calm. Too calm. Like she was waiting for something. Like she had a card left to play. And then it happened. A knock at the door. Strong. Heavy. Not like Karen's sharp little taps. This was louder. Official. I opened the door slowly, and there stood two uniformed officers. Real cops this time. Behind them, Karen. Her arms crossed. A smug smile on her face. One of the officers cleared his throat. "Sir, we received reports of harassment, violations, and refusal to comply with HOA law." Karen stepped forward, waving a folder. "Here's all the evidence. Photos. Reports. Signed complaints from the board. These people don't belong here." My blood boiled. I wanted to argue, to shout, to tell them it was all lies. But my wife, she stepped forward before I could say a word. She pulled out her badge again. Calm. Steady. No fear in her eyes. "Officers," she said. "I am a federal agent. This HOA has crossed the line into harassment and intimidation. And if you proceed without real legal grounds, you'll be interfering with federal business." The officers froze. One looked at the badge. The other looked at Karen. Silence filled the air. And then, one of them shook his head. "Ma'am, we can't enforce HOA rules. That's civil, not criminal. We're leaving." Karen's smile cracked. She tried to protest, but the officers walked away. Just like that. And Karen stood there, red in the face, her folder trembling in her hand. She hissed under her breath, "This isn't over." And then she stormed off again, leaving us in the doorway, hearts pounding. But even as the police left, I couldn't shake the feeling that she meant it. That this battle wasn't finished. That she had something bigger waiting behind her smile. And that's what I need to ask you, friends. If someone like Karen kept pushing, even after the police walked away, would you finally fight back hard, or would you start thinking it's safer to pack up and leave the neighborhood? Tell me in the comments, because I wonder how many of you would stay and how many would run. The night after the police left, I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at the window. The street outside looked calm, too calm. But I knew better now. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She had been humiliated in front of the officers, in front of neighbors who had peeked through their curtains, and people like her, they don't take humiliation lightly. My wife sat across from me, her badge resting on the table between us. She looked calm, sipping her tea like nothing had happened. But I could feel the weight in the air. I whispered to her, "She'll come back." And my wife only nodded, as if she already knew. The next morning, I found something new in the yard. A bright orange paper stuck onto our fence. The words printed in bold. HOA fine, $500, NON compliance. It was taped high, so all the neighbors could see. And believe me, they saw. People slowed their walks just to glance at it. One man even stopped and shook his head, whispering something to his wife before walking faster. It was meant to shame us. To put us on display. I ripped it down, my hands shaking. But within hours, another one appeared on the garage door. And another on the mailbox. Each one brighter, bolder, as if the HOA wanted to cover our house like a billboard of punishment. By the end of the day, I had pulled down 7 notices. 7. Karen's shadow was everywhere. That evening, I decided to confront her. I walked across the street, letter in hand, anger boiling inside me. I pounded on her door. When it opened, she stood there with that same smug smile, like she had been waiting for me. "Enjoying your stay," she said sweetly. I shoved the notice forward. "This is harassment." She laughed. Not a soft laugh, but a sharp one. "Harassment? No. This is order. This is how we keep our neighborhood safe. People like you, people who think they're above the rules, you ruin communities. I won't allow it." I clenched my fists. "We are not joining. My wife and I will not be bullied into paying your fees." Her eyes narrowed. "Then you'll pay in other ways." She closed the door slowly, leaving me in the dark. That night, my wife told me to stay calm. She said the HOA was trying to provoke us, trying to make us lash out. If we did, they'd have more to use against us. But then came the sound that made my blood run cold. It was around midnight. A loud bang against the side of our house. Then another. I ran outside, and there, scattered across the lawn, were eggs. Smashed against our siding. Dripping down the windows. Someone had egged our home. I looked around, but the street was empty. No shadows, no footsteps. Just silence. The next morning, another letter. This one with a photo of our house covered in eggs. And beneath it, proof that you are a nuisance to the neighborhood. Further action coming. I showed it to my wife. She set it on the table, took a deep breath, and said quietly, "They're building a case. But not a legal one, a social one. They want the neighbors to hate us." She was right. The following days were worse. Neighbors stopped talking to us. Some crossed the street to avoid walking past our house. Kids who used to wave at me now looked away. Karen had poisoned the whole block. But then, something strange happened. One evening, as I was putting the trash out, a man approached me quietly. He was older, with gray hair, wearing a jacket zipped up tight. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking. "Be careful," he whispered. "She's done this before." I froze. "What do you mean?" "She ruined another family," he said. 3 years ago. They didn't join the HOA. She started small, then bigger. By the time it was over, they had sold their house and left in the middle of the night. And Karen, she made sure everyone believed they were criminals. I stared at him, my chest tight. "Why are you telling me this?" He shook his head. "Because you're different. Your wife, she scared her. But that won't stop her. She'll push harder. Watch yourself." And then he walked away, disappearing into the shadows before I could ask more. I went inside, told my wife what the man had said. She didn't look surprised. She only said, "Then it's time we prepare." She opened a drawer and placed her badge inside. But next to it, she laid down something else. A small black notebook. Pages filled with notes, dates, times, observations. My wife had been keeping track of everything. Every letter. Every photo. Every threat. "We keep it all," she said. "Because when the time comes, this notebook will matter more than the badge." I realized then that while I had been reacting, she had been planning. But even with her calm, even with her preparation, I could feel the walls closing in. The neighbors were against us. The HOA was circling. And Karen, she was waiting for her next move. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the silence outside. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. Expectant. And then, around 2 in the morning, I heard it. Voices. Whispers near the fence. Flashlights flickering. I pulled back the curtain and saw them. 2 figures standing by our yard, pointing at the house, writing on clipboards. One of them laughed softly before snapping a photo. They were documenting us, building their case. I wanted to run out there, to confront them, but I froze. My wife whispered from the bed, "Don't. Not yet." So I stood there, watching them disappear into the night, knowing this was far from over. And now I need to ask you, neighbors. If it were your home, if people were sneaking into your yard at night, taking pictures, building a case against you, would you stay silent and wait for the right moment, or would you storm out there and put an end to it right then and there? Tell me in the comments, because I can't help but wonder what you would do in the dark of night. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside felt like footsteps, every shadow against the window looked like someone watching us. By morning, my nerves were raw, my hands trembling as I made coffee. When I opened the door to grab the newspaper, I froze. There, nailed to our fence, was a large wooden board, painted in red letters. Non-compliant house. It was big enough for the whole street to see. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down, whispering. Cars passed by and heads turned. It was like a public shaming, a scarlet letter nailed right onto our home. I ripped it down, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew the target had been placed on us. I went back inside, my chest heavy with anger. My wife stood at the window, watching the neighbors stare. She didn't say a word at first. Then, calmly, she whispered, "This isn't about us anymore, this is about control. Karen wants to make an example of us." She was right. Later that afternoon, a thick envelope came in the mail. Not a simple letter this time, but a packet. Inside were pages and pages of violations. Our grass was 1 inch too high. Our trash cans were visible from the street. Our mailbox was the wrong color. Our porch light was too dim. Every little thing, magnified and twisted into a crime. At the bottom of the packet, a total was printed in bold. Fines due, $2,750. I felt sick. We had only been here a few weeks, and already the HOA claimed we owed them thousands of dollars. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march across the street and throw that packet at Karen's feet. But my wife placed a hand on my arm and shook her head. "Not yet," she said softly. "We fight smart, not angry." That night, something happened that made me realize just how far Karen was willing to go. We were eating dinner when the doorbell rang. I opened it and found a man standing there in a suit, holding a briefcase. He introduced himself as the HOA's attorney. He handed me a letter and said coldly, "If you refuse to pay, the HOA will place a lien on your property. You could lose your home." I stared at him, stunned. "You can't do that, we never even signed up for this HOA." He smirked. "The rules apply whether you signed or not. That's the beauty of it." My wife walked up behind me, her badge in her hand. She held it up just enough for him to see. "And harassment," she said firmly, "is a federal crime." The man blinked, his smirk fading. He cleared his throat, muttered something about just doing his job, and walked away quickly. I closed the door, my heart pounding. But even with him gone, the threat remained. They weren't going to stop. Not Karen. Not the HOA. The following morning, I noticed something chilling. Spray paint. On the side of our garage. 3 big letters. "Get out." The paint dripped down the wall like blood. My stomach turned as I realized this wasn't just HOA business anymore, this was personal. I scrubbed the paint off, neighbors watching from across the street, none of them lifting a finger to help. In their eyes, I could see it, fear. They weren't avoiding us because they hated us. They were avoiding us because they were afraid to stand against Karen. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Karen directly. I stood on her porch, pounding on the door until she opened it. She looked at me calmly, sipping her wine, like she had been expecting me. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "What have we ever done to you?" Her smile widened. "You challenged me. You embarrassed me in front of the whole neighborhood. You think you're above the rules because your wife flashes a badge. But here. I am the law. And you will break before I do. I wanted to shout back, to tell her she was wrong. But something in her eyes made me pause. She wasn't bluffing. She truly believed this street was her kingdom. I walked away, my fists clenched, my mind racing. When I got home, my wife was waiting with her notebook. She had written down every violation notice, every threat, every strange event. The egging, the spray paint, the late-night visitors, all of it. She said quietly, "We have enough to expose her." But the question is, do we play defense, or do we go on the attack? I didn't know what to say. I was torn between wanting to protect my family and wanting to fight fire with fire. That night, as I tried to sleep, the sound of footsteps woke me again. I looked out the window and saw something worse than before. A group of people. Not just 2 or 3. At least 6 of them. Standing on the sidewalk, staring at our house. Clipboards. Phones. Taking pictures. Whispering among themselves. It felt like a trial. Like the entire neighborhood had been summoned as witnesses against us. I wanted to run outside. I wanted to tell them the truth. But my wife stopped me. "Let them watch," she whispered. "Because one day, they'll see who was really in the wrong." Her calm gave me strength, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was only going to get worse. And I wondered, how much worse could it get before someone truly got hurt? So let me ask you, my friends. If you were in my shoes, with the whole neighborhood standing outside your home, watching, judging, treating you like a criminal, would you still hold your ground, or would you finally give in just to make the nightmare stop? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know, what would you have done standing behind that window, with 6 pairs of eyes staring back at you? The following morning felt heavier than usual, the kind of morning where the air itself feels thick. I walked out to the porch with my coffee, but I couldn't enjoy it. Across the street, Karen was already outside, watering her flowers as if nothing had happened. But when her eyes met mine, she smiled, that same smug, knowing smile. And in that smile, I saw the message loud and clear: this isn't over. Later that day, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't taped or slipped into the mailbox like the others. It came by certified mail. Official. Signed. Sealed. Inside was a document with a bold heading, Notice of Legal Proceedings. The words blurred as I read them, my pulse hammering in my ears. According to the HOA, we owed over $5,000 in fines, and if we didn't pay within 30 days, they would file a lien against our property. It was real now. Not just threats on paper, not just orange signs, but legal action. A direct attack on our home. I showed the document to my wife. She studied it carefully, flipping each page, her face unreadable. Then she set it down and said softly, "They've made their move. Now it's time for us to make ours." Her calmness unsettled me. I wanted to panic, to shout, to demand answers. But she only pulled her black notebook closer, writing down the date, the sender, the legal reference numbers. She whispered, "Every time they cross the line, they leave a trail. And trails can lead them into their own trap." That night, I couldn't rest. I kept thinking about losing our home. About packing everything up, about leaving under the shadow of defeat. But my wife, she seemed unshaken. She even slept soundly. I envied her strength. The following week, things escalated. Karen didn't just stop at letters. She started a campaign. Flyers appeared on mailboxes up and down the street, each one with our address written at the top. Non-compliant residents, hazard to our community. She called us a hazard. She accused us of ignoring safety rules, lowering property values, creating tension. It was a lie, but lies spread fast. At the grocery store, I noticed people turning away when they saw me. At the gas station, a neighbor I'd spoken with just days before ignored my wave. Even the mailman seemed colder, dropping our envelopes with a shake of his head. It felt like we were trapped in a cage, every exit sealed by Karen's influence. One evening, as the sun set, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find an older man standing there, his hat in his hand. His face was lined with worry. He introduced himself as a former HOA board member. He lowered his voice and said, "You need to be careful. Karen, she doesn't stop. Years ago, she drove out another family. Same tricks, same lies. They lost everything. She thrives on fear. She'll push until you break." I asked him why he was telling me this. He sighed. "Because I regret staying silent then. And I don't want to regret it again." Before I could ask more, he tipped his hat and walked away. His warning replayed in my head all night. The next morning, I decided to test something. I walked out onto the porch, held my head high, and waved at the neighbors. Some turned away. Some froze. But one woman, 2 houses down, hesitated, and then gave me the smallest nod. It was enough to tell me Karen didn't own everyone. Some were still watching quietly, waiting. But Karen noticed. She stormed down the street, shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't fall for their act. They're troublemakers. They don't respect our rules, and they'll ruin this neighborhood if we let them." Her words cut through the air. Some neighbors nodded in agreement. Others looked away, embarrassed. My wife stepped out beside me, her badge hidden but her presence strong. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Just standing there, calm and unshaken, was enough to show Karen we weren't breaking. But Karen's fury only grew. That night, another knock on the door. Hard. Relentless. When I opened it, I found not neighbors, but men in suits. They claimed to be from the HOA's legal committee. They handed me another stack of papers, thicker than before. Inside were signatures. Dozens of them. Neighbors who had voted against us, demanding we either join the HOA or face removal from the community. I felt my chest tighten. Could they really do that? Could they really throw us out of our own home? My wife scanned the papers, flipping through names. She smirked slightly and said, "Interesting. Some of these signatures don't match. Some look copied." She looked up at the men and said firmly, "Forgery is a serious crime. You might want to tell your client that." The men stiffened, muttered something about just delivering documents, and hurried off. That was when I realized my wife wasn't just calm. She was building a case. Quietly. Carefully. Each threat, each forgery, each false claim, she was letting Karen dig her own hole. Still, the pressure was crushing me. Each day felt heavier, each night longer. The stares, the letters, the lies, it was eating me alive. And yet, somehow, my wife carried it like a shield. One night, as we sat on the porch under the stars, I asked her, "How can you stay so calm? Don't you feel the weight of all this?" She looked at me, her eyes steady. "Because I've dealt with worse than Karen. Bullies always look big when they stand alone. But when the light shines on them, they crumble." Her words gave me hope. But hope didn't stop the fear. The next day, another spray of graffiti appeared on our sidewalk. Big, bold letters, "Leave." This wasn't just Karen anymore. This was the neighborhood turning into a mob. And for the first time, I wondered if staying here was worth it. So let me ask you, friends. If your family was being pushed like this, the lies growing, the neighbors turning cold, the threats piling up, would you keep fighting to prove you were right, or would you walk away just to find peace again? Tell me in the comments, because I can't stop asking myself, how much is a home really worth when the whole street wants you gone? That night the air felt different, heavier, darker. I sat by the window, staring at the street, waiting for the next move. Karen's house was lit up, voices drifting out, shadows moving across her curtains. It looked like a meeting. A gathering of allies. My wife sat beside me, her notebook in her lap, her pen moving steadily across the page. She didn't look nervous. She looked focused. Like she was piecing together a puzzle only she could see. I whispered, "What are they planning?" She didn't look up. She just said, something big. You don't gather people like that for nothing. Minutes later, headlights cut across the street. Cars parked outside our house. 3 of them. Men and women stepped out, dressed in business suits, holding folders and clipboards. They didn't knock this time. They stood at the end of our driveway, shining flashlights on our property, writing notes, snapping pictures. Karen came out to join them, her voice loud and sharp. This family refuses to comply. They think they are above the law. We will not let them destroy our neighborhood. Her words echoed through the night. Curtains opened. Neighbors peeked out. Some even stepped onto their porches, nodding, whispering. It felt like a public trial right there on our lawn. I wanted to run out, to shout that it was all lies. But my wife put her hand on my arm. Not yet, she said again. Instead, she stood up, walked calmly to the front door, and opened it wide. The porch light spilled across the driveway. Everyone froze as she stepped outside. Her voice was calm, steady. If you want to accuse us, do it in court. Not in the street. Karen sneered. Oh, we will. And you'll lose everything. My wife held up her phone, snapping photos of the group. Good, she said. Because now I have evidence of harassment. Every single one of you trespassing and threatening us. The group shifted uneasily. Some lowered their clipboards. Karen's face turned red. She shouted, "This is our neighborhood. You don't belong here." But my wife didn't flinch. She simply turned and walked back inside, leaving the door wide open, her badge gleaming in the porch light for everyone to see. The silence that followed was heavier than the shouting. Slowly, the group backed away, muttering, climbing into their cars. Karen lingered, her eyes burning, before finally storming off. I closed the door, my heart racing. My wife calmly set her phone on the table, uploading the photos. "Let them come," she whispered. "Every step they take, they make our case stronger." But I couldn't shake the fear. The next morning, another envelope arrived. This time, it wasn't fines or notices. It was a summons. The HOA had filed a lawsuit. They were taking us to court. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. Court meant money. Lawyers. Time. Stress. It meant dragging this nightmare into a new battlefield. My wife, though, she almost smiled. She opened her drawer, pulled out her notebook, and laid it beside the summons. "Perfect," she said softly. "Now we can fight them on record." The days leading up to the court date were worse than ever. More flyers. More graffiti. Even threatening phone calls late at night. Neighbors avoided us completely now, crossing the street, locking eyes on the ground. It felt like we were living in isolation, surrounded by enemies. The night before court, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Karen standing in front of a judge, spinning her lies, backed by signatures and fake evidence. But my wife, she was steady as ever. She rehearsed her words, stacked her notes, charged her phone. She was ready. The morning came. We drove to the courthouse in silence. My chest felt like it was caving in. Inside, the room was packed. Karen sat at the front with her board members, her smile wide, her eyes glinting with victory. She waved at us mockingly as we took our seats. The judge entered, and the hearing began. The HOA's lawyer spoke first, presenting the fines, the notices, the photos. He painted us as rebels, troublemakers, lawbreakers who thought we were above everyone else. Karen nodded dramatically at every word. Then it was our turn. My wife stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She simply opened her notebook, one page at a time, and spoke clearly. She showed every letter. Every photo. Every threat. She presented recordings of Karen shouting on our property. She presented photos of HOA members trespassing in the night. And then, she held up her badge. "I am a federal agent," she said firmly. "I know harassment when I see it. And this This is harassment." The room went silent. Even the judge leaned forward. Karen sputtered, her face red. "She's bluffing. She's trying to intimidate us." But my wife stayed calm. She handed her identification to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge studied it carefully, then looked directly at Karen. "This is serious," the judge said. "And from what I've seen so far, the HOA may be overstepping its authority." Karen's face fell. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The rest of the hearing felt like a blur. The judge ordered a delay, demanding more evidence before making any ruling. But the look on Karen's face, that told me everything. For the first time, she wasn't in control. We walked out of that courtroom with our heads high. Neighbors watched in silence as we returned home. Some looked shocked. Some looked uncertain. And for the first time, I thought, maybe the tide was turning. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her don't stop when they're cornered. They lash out harder. That night, as I sat on the porch, I saw her silhouette across the street. Her blinds were open just enough for me to see her pacing, shouting into her phone. She was planning something. Something bigger. And that thought kept me awake long into the night. So let me ask you, neighbors. If you were standing in that courtroom, watching your wife lay down the truth, watching the judge question Karen for the first time, would you finally feel like justice was near, or would you fear the revenge waiting outside those doors? Tell me in the comments, because I still can't decide which feeling was stronger in that moment, relief or dread. The days after the court hearing were strange, almost too quiet. No more flyers. No more graffiti. No more late-night trespassers with flashlights. For the first time since we moved into that house, the street felt calm. But it wasn't a peaceful calm, it was the kind of silence you feel before a storm. Karen's blinds stayed closed most of the day. Her car barely moved. Neighbors avoided eye contact, whispering only when they thought we couldn't hear. It was as if the whole block was holding its breath. My wife warned me. She's not done. People like Karen never walk away. They wait. They plot. She was right. One night, just a week after the hearing, I woke to a strange sound. Not footsteps this time. Not whispers. It was louder. Crashing. Shattering. I rushed to the living room, my heart pounding. The window by the porch was broken, glass scattered across the floor. A rock lay in the middle of the carpet, wrapped in paper. I unwrapped it with trembling hands. The note inside read, "Leave, or next time it won't be just glass." I stood there in shock, my hands shaking. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was violence. My wife picked up the rock calmly, slipped it into her notebook, and said, "Now we have evidence they can't deny." But her calm didn't erase my fear. The line had been crossed. The next day, I installed cameras around the house. Every angle, every corner covered. My wife said it was the right move, but deep down, I wondered, what if cameras weren't enough? And then it happened. 2 nights later, the cameras caught everything. A group of figures creeping onto our lawn, spray cans in their hands. They painted across the driveway in giant red letters, "Get out or else." One of them looked straight at the camera. And it wasn't just any neighbor. It was Karen. She wasn't hiding anymore. The footage was clear. Her face, her voice as she laughed, her hand pressing the can against our driveway. When my wife showed the footage to the police the next morning, they couldn't ignore it. This wasn't HOA business. This was criminal. Karen was arrested that very afternoon. I watched from the porch as the officers placed her in handcuffs, her face twisted with rage. She screamed at us across the street, her voice breaking with fury. "You'll regret this. You'll regret the day you ever moved here." The neighbors all stood frozen, watching their self-proclaimed queen being taken away. Some looked shocked. Some looked relieved. Some looked scared, not of Karen, but of what her downfall might mean for them. For the first time, the street felt lighter. For the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But even with her gone, the scars remained. The mailbox still carried dents from her notes. The siding still bore faint stains from eggs. The driveway still smelled of paint, even after hours of scrubbing. And the neighbors, they still kept their distance, as if we carried Karen's shadow wherever we walked. My wife told me it didn't matter. She said, what matters is that we stood our ground. We didn't let her break us. And she was right. We had survived. Weeks passed. The court date came again, this time without Karen's fire leading the charge. Without her, the HOA stumbled. Their lies, their forged signatures, their weak claims, they fell apart under scrutiny. The judge dismissed the fines, dismissed the liens, dismissed everything. It was over. Or at least, the official battle was over. Because the truth is, even after Karen was gone, I could still feel her presence. I'd walk to the end of the driveway and expect to see her smirk. I'd take out the trash and expect to hear her voice shouting across the street. Sometimes, at night, I'd wake and swear I heard footsteps by the fence. But when I checked the cameras, there was nothing. Maybe it was just paranoia. Or maybe Karen had planted herself so deep in this neighborhood that her ghost would linger forever. Still, life slowly returned. The neighbors started nodding again, cautiously at first. A few even stopped by to apologize. They admitted they were too afraid to stand up to her, too afraid of becoming the next target. One older couple brought us a pie, whispering, "Thank you for stopping her." We couldn't. It wasn't much, but it was something. A start. As for my wife, she stayed the same. Calm. Steady. Always writing in her notebook. She told me once, it's not just about us. It's about showing bullies like her that fear doesn't rule forever. And she was right. But sometimes, late at night, when the street is quiet and the moonlight hits just right, I catch myself staring across at Karen's empty house. And I wonder, if someone else moves in there, will the house change them? Or was it always her? So now I ask you, neighbors, the ones listening to my story. If you had been in my shoes, watching Karen get hauled away in handcuffs, watching the HOA collapse without her, would you finally breathe easy and move on? Or would you still feel that shadow, always looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next Karen to rise? Tell me in the comments, because after everything that happened, I still don't know if we truly won, or if we only survived.